I've been married to my wife for 20 years, and we've got twin sons who are 21. This past New Year's Eve has turned my world upside down, and I need to figure out what to do next. Let me give you a bit of background first. My wife and I met over 23 years ago. It was Thanksgiving, and I was working on my dad's farm back then. I had a girlfriend at the time, but we broke up shortly after I met my wife. She was just sitting on a bench, and we struck up a conversation. We hit it off immediately and decided to meet again the next day. From then on, we were inseparable. I even proposed to her in a bar, and she said yes right away. We got married and have had what I thought was a solid 20 years together. Fast forward to New Year's Eve 2023. My wife and I had a huge fight. I can't even remember what it was about, but it was bad enough that we decided we wouldn't spend New Year's together. She went to her friends, our sons went to their friends, and I stayed home. Not wanting to spoil the holiday, I busied myself with New Year's decorations, preparing gifts, and shoveling snow. Some acquaintances came over, but I decided to leave and head to the Rose Parade in California, where we live. The Rose Parade was beautiful. The last time I had been there was 10 years ago. It was a nice distraction from the argument with my wife. When I woke up on New Year's Day, I noticed my wife wasn't home. I tried calling her, but she didn't answer. I had to go to work, so I left without speaking to her. During work, she finally called back and told me everything was fine. By the time I got home, it felt like we hadn't even argued, which I thought was great at the time. But then, things took a turn for the worse. Later that evening, I got into my minivan and drove home. As I was pulling into the garage, one of my wife's friends called me. She sounded nervous and told me that my wife had cheated on me on New Year's. She had seen my wife with another man, going into a bedroom together. Hearing that, I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My wife walked up to me right then, asking if something had happened. I couldn't breathe, let alone speak. Finally, I managed to tell her everything was fine and made up a story about a colleague calling. I couldn't sleep that night. I didn't know what to do. I only had her friend's word as evidence, so I decided to take a day off work and follow my wife the next day. I needed to know if there was any truth to what I'd been told. That morning, my wife left for work as usual. I followed her and saw nothing suspicious. But then, instead of heading to her office, she drove to a different part of town. She parked outside a house I didn't recognize and went inside. I waited for about an hour before she came out, looking way too happy for someone who was supposed to be at work. I confronted her that evening, and she denied everything at first. But when I told her I had followed her, she broke down and admitted to cheating on me. She said it was a one-time thing, a mistake. I didn't know whether to believe her or not. The trust we had built over 20 years was shattered in an instant. I don't know what to do. Do I confront the guy she was with? Do I tell our sons? They're adults, but I don't want to ruin their relationship with their mother. And what about my brothers? One is 52, the other is 48. We're close, and I don't want this to come between us. I keep thinking back to when we first met. She was everything to me, and I thought I was everything to her. Now I don't know if I ever really knew her. We've had a good life together. Sure, we've had our ups and downs, but I never thought she'd do something like this. The day after I followed her, I took another day off work. I needed to clear my head and figure out what to do next. I decided to talk to my brothers first. They're both older and have always been there for me. I called them and asked if they could come over. When they arrived, I told them everything. They were as shocked as I was. My oldest brother, who is 52, suggested I talk to a lawyer. My other brother, who is 48, said I should confront the guy she was with. I didn't know what to do, but I appreciated their support. I also called our sons. They were both at their respective universities, so I had to tell them over the phone. They were devastated. They couldn't believe their mother would do something like this. I told them I didn't want this to affect their relationship with her, but I understood if they needed some time to process everything. After talking to my brothers and my sons, I decided to talk to a lawyer. I needed to know what my options were. The lawyer was very understanding and told me I had several options. I could file for divorce, or we could try to work things out through counseling. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do yet, but it was good to know I had options. I decided to confront the guy she was with. I needed to know who he was and why he thought it was okay to sleep with my wife. I found out where he lived and went to his house. When he opened the door, I told him who I was and demanded to know why he had slept with my wife. He looked surprised and said he didn't know she was married. I didn't believe him. We had a heated argument, and I left feeling even more confused and hurt. I went home and confronted my wife again. This time, I told her I had talked to a lawyer and was considering filing for divorce. She broke down and begged me to give her another chance. She said she would do anything to make it right. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to believe her, but another part of me felt like it was too late. If you've got any advice, I could really use it right now. Should I keep going to counseling on my own? How do I rebuild my life after something like this? How do I learn to trust again? Thanks for reading. I appreciate any advice or support you can offer. Hey everyone, thank you all for the advice and support in my last post. I never expected to get so many responses, and I really appreciate every single one of them. It's been a roller coaster, and I'm still trying to figure things out, but your words have helped more than you know. So, here's an update on what's been happening. After everything went down, I decided to take care of myself first. I went to the doctor and got checked out. With all the stress, I wanted to make sure my health wasn't taking a hit. Luckily, everything came back fine, which was a huge relief. The doctor did advise me to find ways to manage my stress, so I've been trying to focus on that. I also reached out to my lawyer again. The last time we talked, he told me that I didn't have enough solid evidence to move forward with a divorce. That was a punch to the gut. I needed proof if I wanted to protect myself and make sure things went smoothly. So I hired a private investigator. It felt weird, almost like something out of a movie, but I needed to know the truth, and I needed evidence to back it up. While the investigator was doing his thing, I decided to call my family. I talked a lot about the divorce with my mom. She's always been my rock, and she didn't disappoint this time either. We had a long conversation about the right way to handle everything. She gave me the strength I needed to keep going. Knowing she was on my side made a world of difference. I also reached out to my friends. It's funny how you realize who your true friends are in times of crisis. They were all incredibly supportive. We talked about everything, from the betrayal to the logistics of a divorce. They helped me see things from different perspectives and reminded me that I wasn't alone in this. Talking to my sons was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. They're adults now, and they deserve to know everything. We sat down and had a long, difficult conversation. They were shocked and hurt, just like I was, but they were also supportive. We talked about the divorce in detail, and I assured them that I was going to do everything I could to make sure it didn't impact them more than it already had. It was a tough conversation, but it brought us closer together. A few days later, I got a call from the private investigator. He told me he had some evidence and that I needed to come in person. My heart was pounding as I drove to his office. When I got there, we talked for a bit, and then he handed me the photos. They were of my wife with the guy she had cheated on me with. They left no room for doubt. Seeing those photos was like getting punched in the gut all over again, but I needed them. I took the photos and immediately sent them to my lawyer. He called me back the same day and said we finally had what we needed to move forward. It was a small victory in the middle of all this chaos. Talking to my family again, this time with the evidence in hand, was another step forward. My mom was relieved that I finally had proof, and my brothers were ready to support me in any way they could. My friends were equally supportive, and we spent hours talking about the next steps. My sons were a bit more complicated. They were relieved that we had proof, but they were also angry. Angry at their mom for betraying me, and angry at the guy she cheated with. We talked a lot about how they were feeling and what this meant for our family. It was tough, but I think it brought us even closer. Throughout this whole process, I've been trying to take care of myself. I started going to the gym again, trying to channel my anger and frustration into something positive. I also started seeing a therapist. It was something I had resisted for a long time, but I realized I couldn't do this alone. The therapist has been great, helping me process everything and giving me tools to cope with the stress and emotions. There were days when I felt like I couldn't go on, like the weight of everything was too much to bear. But then I'd get a call from a friend or a message from one of my sons, and it would remind me that I wasn't alone. I had people who cared about me and who were rooting for me. That made all the difference. One thing I've learned through all of this is the importance of having a support system. Whether it's family, friends, or a therapist, having people to lean on has been crucial. It's something I never really appreciated before, but now I don't know how I would have gotten through this without them. Now, I'm focused on moving forward. The divorce process is underway, and while it's not going to be easy, I know it's the right thing to do. I'm trying to take things one day at a time, focusing on my health, my sons, and my future. I know there will be more tough days ahead, but I also know I'm strong enough to get through them. If there's one piece of advice I can give to anyone going through something similar, it's to reach out for help. Don't try to do it all on your own. Lean on the people who care about you, and don't be afraid to ask for support. It makes all the difference. Thank you all again for your advice and support. It means more to me than I can put into words. I'm back with another update. Things have been a whirlwind, and I'm still trying to make sense of it all. Your support has been invaluable, and I hope sharing my story continues to help me, and maybe even someone else, going through a tough time. So after everything that happened, I made a tough decision. I moved out of our family home and into a small apartment. The boys stayed at home while my wife continued her time at the university. It wasn't easy leaving them, but I needed space to clear my head and figure things out. I took some time off work too. I couldn't focus, and I knew I needed to get myself together before diving back into the daily grind. My brothers have been a real lifeline through all of this. We decided to meet up one night to talk, have a few drinks, and just try to forget about all the chaos for a while. We went to a local bar we used to frequent when we were younger. It was nice, almost like stepping back in time. We talked about everything, from old memories to my current mess. They were supportive as always, and it felt good to just let loose a bit. I got a little drunk, which I probably needed, but my brothers made sure I got home safely. The next morning was rough. I woke up with a pounding headache, the remnants of the previous night's escapade. I barely managed to drag myself to the kitchen to get some water and painkillers when my phone rang. It was my boys. They called to check in and told me everything was fine at home. It was a relief to hear their voices and know they were okay. Not long after, my wife called me. She was furious and adamant that she wasn't going to give up the kids. She went on and on about how she was the better parent, how she deserved to keep them. I tried to stay calm, but my patience was wearing thin. I told her that the court would decide everything. I wasn't going to argue with her about it anymore. The courts would see the evidence and they would decide what was best for our sons. She didn't take that well and hung up on me, but I was done arguing. Then one day, something unexpected happened. Her lover showed up at my apartment. I wasn't prepared for that. I opened the door to see a man standing there, looking slightly nervous, but determined. He introduced himself, and I realized he was about 40 years old. Knowing about him and seeing him in person were two entirely different things. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I don't know why, but seeing him made everything so much more real. He started talking, saying something about how he loved her and how they didn't mean for things to happen this way. I didn't want to hear it. I felt a surge of anger and disgust. Before he could finish, I shut the door in his face. I didn't want his explanations or apologies. I just wanted him out of my life. I sat down afterward, trying to calm myself. The audacity of that man, showing up and expecting me to listen to him. It was too much. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. This wasn't the life I had envisioned. I spent the rest of the day trying to distract myself, but it was hard. My mind kept drifting back to everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the sheer mess of it all. I wondered how long it would take to feel normal again, or if I ever would. I decided to dive back into work. It was a welcome distraction, and it helped keep my mind off things. I threw myself into my projects, working long hours just to avoid going home to my empty apartment. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was something. I kept in touch with my sons regularly. They were my main priority, and I wanted to make sure they were doing okay. They seemed to be handling things as well as could be expected. We talked about their school, their friends, and just normal stuff. I wanted to keep things as normal as possible for them. As for my wife, we only communicated when necessary, mostly through our lawyers. The divorce proceedings were underway, and it was a slow, painful process. Each step forward felt like a battle, but I was determined to see it through. I deserved a clean break, and I was going to get it. My friends and family continued to support me, and I leaned on them heavily. We had more nights out, more long talks, and they never made me feel like a burden. Their support was the only thing keeping me afloat some days. I'm still trying to navigate this new reality. Some days are better than others, but I'm slowly finding my way. Your advice and encouragement have meant the world to me. Knowing that there are people out there who care, even strangers, has been a comfort. I'm taking it one day at a time, focusing on my sons and rebuilding my life. It's not easy, and I have a long road ahead, but I'm getting there. If you're going through something similar, know that you're not alone. Reach out for help, lean on the people who care about you, and take it one day at a time. I'm back with another update. It's been a rough journey, but I'm slowly getting through it all. Your support has been incredible, and I can't thank you enough for all the advice and encouragement. I've been trying to keep myself busy and healthy. I still play sports regularly and make sure to go to the doctor for checkups. The physical activity helps clear my mind, and the doctor visits are a reminder to take care of myself, especially with all the stress I've been under. It's been a good way to channel my energy and stay focused. The other day I was sitting in my apartment sipping tea, and I felt this urge to call my mother. She's 72 now, but in great health and always full of energy. I needed to hear her voice to get some words of support. With the trial coming up soon, I wanted to hear her reassurance. I told her about the upcoming court date and how anxious I was feeling. As always, she was a rock, telling me to stay strong and that everything would work out in the end. Her words were comforting, and it felt good to hear her say she was proud of how I was handling everything. The trial, of course, was something I dreaded, but also felt a strange anticipation for. I couldn't help but think about how my wife would feel when she realized she wasn't getting anything. Part of me wanted to see that moment, to see the look on her face when she understood the consequences of her actions. The trial was just a couple of days away, and the anticipation was building up inside me. Then there was another unexpected encounter. One of my wife's friends came to see me. This friend, let's call her Jane, was someone who always seemed to be in the background. She wasn't particularly successful and often leaned on my wife for support. My wife would pay for her things and humiliate her when it suited her. Jane came to me, asking me not to be so strict with my wife. It was clear she was dependent on my wife and didn't want to lose whatever benefit she was getting from their friendship. I listened to Jane, and as she talked, I could see how pathetic and dependent she was. Deep down, I think she might have been glad that my wife's life was falling apart. It meant she wasn't alone in her misery. I decided to do something unexpected. I gave her $3,000 and told her to stay away from my wife. Yes, I know it sounds silly, but I found it quite funny. She took the money and promised to keep her distance. For the first time in a while, I felt like I had some control over the situation, and it was oddly satisfying. As the trial date approached, I tried to stay busy and keep my mind off things. I continued working out, meeting with my friends, and spending time with my sons. They were a constant source of support and kept me grounded. We had many late-night talks about the situation, and their perspective helped me see things more clearly. My lawyer was confident about the trial. With the evidence we had, he assured me things would go in my favor. Still, the anxiety was hard to shake off. I kept replaying different scenarios in my head, wondering how it would all play out. I spent the night before the trial at my apartment, going over everything one last time. I reviewed all the documents and evidence, making sure I was prepared for whatever might come up. I barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts and emotions. I kept thinking about my life before all this happened, how things used to be, and how drastically everything had changed. In the morning, I got a call from my sons. They wished me luck and told me they were proud of me. Their words meant the world to me and gave me the strength I needed to face the day. I got dressed, grabbed my briefcase, and headed to the courthouse. The trial itself was a blur. There were moments when I felt like I was outside my body, watching everything unfold from a distance. My wife looked nervous and uncomfortable, which gave me a small sense of satisfaction. Her lover was nowhere to be seen, and I wondered if he had abandoned her now that things were getting real. My lawyer presented our case with confidence, laying out all the evidence clearly and concisely. When it was my wife's turn to speak, she tried to play the victim, but it was clear that the judge wasn't buying it. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and it was obvious that her infidelity and deceit had led us to this point. During a break in the proceedings, I stepped outside for some fresh air. I called my mother again, needing her reassurance one more time. She told me to stay strong and reminded me that I had done everything right. Her words were a balm to my frayed nerves, and I felt a renewed sense of determination. Back in the courtroom, the final arguments were made, and the judge retired to make a decision. Those moments of waiting felt like an eternity. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and my mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. I glanced over at my wife, who looked pale and defeated. It was a far cry from the confident woman I had married all those years ago. When the judge returned, everyone held their breath. The verdict was read, and I could barely process the words. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me primary custody of our sons and awarding me a significant portion of our assets. My wife was left with little, and the look on her face was a mixture of shock and despair. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was a profound sense of sadness. This wasn't how I had envisioned our lives turning out. We had built so much together, and now it was all crumbling away. The victory felt hollow, and I realized that there were no real winners in this situation. After the trial, I met up with my brothers and friends. We went out for drinks, trying to celebrate the small victory while acknowledging the pain that still lingered. They tried to lift my spirits, reminding me that I had done the right thing, and that this was the first step towards rebuilding my life. My sons were relieved with the outcome, and we had another long talk about what the future would look like. We discussed living arrangements, their education, and how we would move forward as a family. It was a difficult conversation, but it brought us closer and solidified our bond. In the days that followed, I focused on putting the pieces of my life back together. I continued to play sports, go to the gym, and attend my doctor's appointments. Staying active and healthy was my way of coping with the stress and finding a sense of normalcy. I also began to reconnect with old friends and make new ones. It was time to build a new support network and surround myself with positive influences. I started attending social events, joining clubs, and even taking up some new hobbies. It was a way to remind myself that life goes on and that there are still good things to be found amidst the chaos. I moved back into the family home, with my sons, of course. We made some changes to the house, redecorating and rearranging things to make it feel like a fresh start. It was therapeutic, a way to symbolically cleanse the space of the past and create a new environment for our future. There were moments when the pain of betrayal still hit me hard, but I reminded myself of the progress I was making. I had come a long way since that fateful New Year's Eve, and I knew I had the strength to keep moving forward. Thank you all for your continued support and encouragement. Hey everyone, it's been a month since my last update, and I wanted to share what's been going on. First off, thank you all for your support and advice. Your words have been a lifeline during this crazy time, and I can't express how much I appreciate it. So, where to start? Well, my wife has been calling me nonstop. She's been asking for money, begging to see our sons, and apologizing over and over. It's been sad to hear, honestly. Every time she calls, I just feel a mix of anger and pity. She sounds so desperate, but after everything she's done, I can't find it in me to feel sorry for her. I ended up hanging up on her every time. It's harsh, I know, but I need to protect myself and my sons. Speaking of my sons, they've been handling things as best they can. My wife's been calling them too, asking for money. I hope to God they haven't sent her anything. We've talked about it, and I told them not to give her any money. I think they understand, but there's always that worry in the back of my mind. They're good kids, and they've been incredibly supportive. But this whole situation is hard for everyone. I've been talking a lot more with my parents lately. They're getting older, and I realized I need to cherish the time I have with them. My mom especially has been a rock for me. We've had some really good conversations, and it's been comforting to know they're there for me. My dad's been great too. He's always been the strong, silent type, but he's shown his support in his own way. I've also been reconnecting with my friends. They've been amazing throughout all of this. We've had more nights out, more long talks, and they've been a constant source of strength. It's funny how you realize who your true friends are when things go south. They've all stood by me, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. Sports have remained a big part of my life. They've been my sanctuary, a way to channel all the anger and frustration. I've been hitting the gym regularly, playing basketball with some friends, and even picked up running again. It's been therapeutic, to say the least. Staying active has helped keep my mind off things and maintain some semblance of normalcy. Work has been another constant. Throwing myself into my projects has been a good distraction. I've been working long hours, partly to keep busy and partly because I actually enjoy it. It's been good to focus on something productive and feel like I'm accomplishing something. I also want to give a shout out to my brothers. They've been there for me every step of the way. Whether it's late night phone calls, meeting up for drinks, or just being there to listen, they've been incredible. I don't know how I would have gotten through this without them. And finally, I want to thank all of you who are reading this. Your comments, messages, and support have meant the world to me. Knowing there are people out there who care, even if we've never met, has been a huge comfort. Reflecting on everything, I've been thinking a lot about the people I choose to let into my life. My dad once told me that he lends money to acquaintances that he's ready to lose. If they don't pay it back, it's a cheap way to find out who's worth keeping around. I've tried to live by that principle, but somehow, I let someone like my wife into my life. Maybe I was thinking with something other than my head when I was younger. It's a hard lesson to learn, but it's one I'll never forget. I remember when I first met my wife. It was Thanksgiving, and I was working on my dad's farm. I had a girlfriend at the time, but when I met my wife, everything changed. She was sitting on a bench, and we just started talking. We hit it off immediately and decided to meet again the next day. I thought I had found my soulmate. We got married, had twin boys, and I thought we were happy. But looking back, I can see the cracks that I ignored. Our marriage wasn't perfect. We had our ups and downs, but I never imagined she would betray me like this. The New Year's Eve fight was the beginning of the end. I still remember the feeling of disbelief when her friend called and told me she had cheated on me. It was like my world had crumbled. I hired a private investigator, got the evidence I needed, and went through the painful process of a divorce. The trial was tough, but it was necessary. Seeing her face when she realized she wasn't getting anything was a bittersweet moment. Part of me wanted to revel in her misery, but another part of me just felt sad. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. After the trial, I focused on rebuilding my life. I moved back into the family home with my sons and made some changes to the house. It was therapeutic, a way to cleanse the space of the past and create a new environment for our future. We painted, redecorated, and made it our own again. My relationship with my sons has grown stronger through all of this. We've had some tough conversations, but they've brought us closer together. We've talked about their future, their feelings about the divorce, and what we want our new life to look like. They're incredible young men, and I'm so proud of them. There were moments when the pain of betrayal still hit me hard, but I reminded myself of the progress I was making. I had come a long way since that fateful New Year's Eve, and I knew I had the strength to keep moving forward. Sports and work have been my saviors. Staying active and busy has kept my mind off things and helped me find a new routine. I've been hitting the gym regularly, playing basketball with friends, and even picked up running again. It's been therapeutic, to say the least. Work has been another constant. Throwing myself into my projects has been a good distraction. I've been working long hours, partly to keep busy and partly because I actually enjoy it. It's been good to focus on something productive and feel like I'm accomplishing something. Reconnecting with my parents has been another silver lining. They've been so supportive, and I've made a point to spend more time with them. My mom especially has been a rock for me. We've had some really good conversations, and it's been comforting to know they're there for me. My friends have been incredible too. We've had more nights out, more long talks, and they've been a constant source of strength. It's funny how you realize who your true friends are when things go south. They've all stood by me, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. My brothers have been there for me every step of the way. Whether it's late-night phone calls, meeting up for drinks, or just being there to listen, they've been amazing. I don't know how I would have gotten through this without them. As for my wife, I've made peace with the fact that she's out of my life. Her calls for money and apologies are just noise now. I've moved on, and I'm focusing on the future. It's not easy, but I'm getting there. I want to thank all of you again for your support. Your comments, messages, and encouragement have meant the world to me. Knowing there are people out there who care, even if we've never met, has been a huge comfort. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's the importance of choosing the right people to let into your life. My dad's advice about lending money to acquaintances was spot on. It's a cheap way to find out who's worth keeping around. I let someone like my wife into my life, and it was a hard lesson to learn, but it's one I'll never forget. So if you're going through something similar, Remember to lean on the people who care about you. Take care of yourself, stay active, and keep moving forward. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, but with the right support, you can get through anything.